Welcome to Recovery Rising with Kelly and Reva, a podcast dedicated to the journey of eating disorder recovery through real stories, advocacy, and awareness.
I'm Reva Van Fleet.
And I'm Kelly Das.
And in this podcast, we discuss eating disorders and eating disorder recovery as it relates to our lived experiences. If you or a loved one is experiencing an eating disorder, please reach out to a licensed mental health and medical professional who specializes in eating disorders. And we'll, of course, work to include resources along the way. Yeah. So, Kelly, the last few episodes we've mentioned, these like coined terms, comorbidity and co-occurring disorders. So I think this week it might be helpful just to dive into that a little bit more, how it shows up in eating disorders and how it's showed up for us as well.
Yes. So they're kind of interchangeable terms. Comorbidity is probably more of a I don't want to say ancient term, but it was probably used more so in back in the day. Now you'll probably more commonly hear co-occurring disorder, which means you have a primary mental health condition, but there's also other ones that are simultaneously present at the time. So, and it's actually quite prevalent. They say anywhere from 50 to about 95% of people that have an eating disorder will also have some other mental health conditions such as depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, substance use disorder, PTSD. So it's actually quite common. I feel like that 50% is kind of low. I usually just don't have.
Exactly. Almost everyone you cross. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I know for me, when I was formally diagnosed, I also had 3 other ones. So I also had cutting, major depression, and PTSD. The cutting one was pretty obvious, but the other 2 I was actually a little surprised about, even though I shouldn't have been about the depression. But back then, I didn't really hear the word post-traumatic stress disorder very often. So that one took some learning to understand what that fully was. But once I did, it kind of all made sense, how the depression, the PTSD, like how that fed into both the cutting and the anorexia. Because when I talked about my recovery, what it meant to me, and I talked about that stage of survival, I was like, yep, let's just deal with the eating disorder. The rest didn't really want to deal with. And again, that was just, kind of afraid to face those things. But it really did start to make sense that the anorexia was there to numb the depression or to regulate it. And then the cutting and the purging part of the eating disorder helped with the PTSD or just calm those symptoms down. So to address those things all at the same time was just very critical because, it wasn't just the eating disorder. There was underlying things there as well. But the stage of recovery with each of them was different.
Yeah.
So it wasn't when the eating disorder went away, that didn't mean the other ones did as well.
Yes.
So I think it was the eating disorder behaviors. Once those were under control and the eating disorder thoughts had quieted down, then I could deal with the depression fully. Not that I wasn't dealing with them all at the same time or trying to treat them all at the same time. It was just the recovery progression was different. I think the cutting was the one that left later, and then PTSD, that one I was dealing with for quite some time. So, but it helped that the eating disorder was dealt with so that I could actually deal with the underlying reasons and other behaviors that I was experiencing at the same time.
And find new coping mechanisms.
Yes,
because the eating disorder does function as a coping mechanism, like you said. And it's, once that is managed, and it's not that your depression goes away or the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder goes away. It's just like you said, you're better equipped to manage those, working with your therapist and finding, of course, like creating that toolbox of skills and coping mechanisms along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For me, I was, when I was an adolescent, a little girl, I kind of developed depression and just anxiety and kind of those negative self-talks that goes along with those a lot, as just early on. Even before I was diagnosed with my eating disorder, I was diagnosed with depression. I had a lot going on in my life at the time, and but like we talked about previously in previous episodes, I think, yeah, once I was actually able to and willing to address the depression, anxiety, and other OCD, other things that were going on in like a holistic way, through medication and kind of
Mhm.
facing those head on. Then I was able to better manage and move into recovery from my eating disorder.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you said holistic approach,
Mhm.
because you'll often hear, well, talk with a therapist, and that's huge critical piece.
Yeah.
But addressing the whole person is very important. And you brought up medication. That's also quite common,
Yeah.
to deal with the anxiety or, OCD or
Mhm.
PTSD, to help manage those symptoms. So that's actually quite common to
Yeah.
also have medication as part of your treatment team or treatment plan as well. So,
Yeah. And we've both talked about like residential treatment
mhm,
settings. A lot of those treatment settings are equipped to address, yeah, those other mental health
mhm.
and mood disorders. And so I think that's so important to, if you can, if you are able to have, yeah, that holistic treatment approach.
Mhm.
Yeah, in any setting, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And two, I think it's also important that in those residential or treatment team settings, as Reva mentioned, you do learn coping plans
Yeah.
and new coping mechanisms,
Mhm.
which will be very important as you do the recovery journey.
Yeah.
Because it might not just help with the eating disorder, but you might find that it helps with one of the other mental health conditions that you might be dealing with as well. So,
Mm.
learning what the different coping mechanisms to deal with any of your mental health conditions that you're dealing with. Um,
And you mentioned it a little bit too. You're like, "Whoa, I was actually kinda surprised that I was they ju," and it's not just about being, like, trapped by this diagnosis, but it
mhm.
is about better understanding yourself, like,
Yes.
and when you do seek treatment, that's why I think it's so important to seek treatment for an eating disorder early on and
Mhm.
always, but, because you really can unearth this underlying what's going on, what's deeper, because although eating disorders is about part of the way it shows up is food and control about your food and your body, but that's just one layer of it. And when you
Yeah,
dig deeper, you kind of unearth these the other pieces of what's going on.
absolutely. And that's actually one of the gifts I have found
Mhm.
through the eating disorder recovery journey is that yes, you are healing back things, digging deeper into those layers. It was very frightening, very hard to do, but the gifts I got from it that I probably wouldn't have if I, hadn't gone through the journey and the therapy process. So also think, just remember too that as hard as it is to address all of these things, face them, there's just gifts that you get with them as well. So I think keeping that in mind kind of helped me keep moving along. Like at some point, I'm going to know that this is going to be so much better for me in the end, as hard as it was to deal with some of this stuff. So, so keeping that in mind as I was doing the recovery journey really helped me too. Is like I know, even though I might not feel it or see it now, but one day digging deeper is really going to be a benefit to me in building me up as a person and being the person that I
Mhm.
want to be. So, so we talked about, trying to deal with all these different
Yeah.
diagnoses at once, and it can be a little bit shocking
It can,
because
yes.
whether because sometimes you might be diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and you're like, well,
Mhm.
what's that? What does that mean? How does it affect everything else? How to manage my
Mhm.
life? So, but that's of the importance of having that comprehensive treatment team is there to help you explain what all of that means
Yeah.
and what the recovery piece can look like in the recovery journeys.
Yeah, and even, like, we talk about moving forward in recovery, when your eating disorder is, when you're moving through eating disorder recovery, sometimes these other things can get worse. They can f like, it can be, for me, at
Yeah.
least, just personally speaking, my anxiety just seems to ramp up, and I like the like and I just get really down, and my that negative self-talk just gets so loud,
Mhm.
and even like, yeah, compulsive urges and all these things just start they're not being suppressed anymore. Like they're
Right.
not, like you just said, like they're not being covered up, and so it can feel like, oh, well, like this it actually gets worse now that I'm not like in my eating disorder. What the heck? Like, but that's so important to move through that and talk through again with your
Mm.
treatment team, at least for me.
Yep.
That was helpful. And, and yeah, and it doesn't mean that it's worse when you're not in your eating disorder. It's just it's not being suppressed or numbed anymore. Yeah, huge
Absolutely.
red flag, right?
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that experience too, is when the eating disorder behaviors went away, and even when the voice went away, just the PTSD almost
Mhm.
opened up a little bit. And I'm not trying to discourage anybody from moving forward in their treatment in that way. The scary parts. There was also a relief too, because I felt like in the back of my mind, I was like, I know at some point I do really have to deal with this.
Yes.
But again, I did have that support team with me, which again, will never say try to do this alone. So
No.
having that safe space where you can deal when the other things rise up, if the eating disorder thoughts and behaviors are down, the coping mechanism is no longer there. I called it my security blanket, oddly
Yes,
enough,
I
as I
know,
was
I
going through
know.
treatment. It's like, I can't imagine life without it.
Yeah.
But as that wore away, yeah, some of the other stuff did come to the
Mhm.
surface. But luckily, I did have that support team to deal with it. And again, not linear by any means, that dealing with PTSD and the depression and all those other things. But yeah, I did notice too that it kind of did a little kind of rise to the surface a little bit more because it wasn't being coped with an eating
Exactly.
disorder. It wasn't being suppressed and silenced and numbed, like you
Yeah.
said.
Exactly, and something that's been helpful for me just recently has been, like,
Mm.
and it's again my personal experience, but has been, looking at myself in, like, different parts. So I've got the eating disorder part that I've, worked
Mm.
on, I'm working on, and then my, depression and anxiety, and so I've got different, like, parts of myself that, and so it's like when you're really calling out one, it's gonna get loud and kind of fight back, and that's
Mhm.
how I've noticed it showing up for me. And but it is important to like give that shine that light on those parts. It's been really helpful and kind of
Mhm.
seeing it in that way. So I think, of course, that's again another coping mechanism or
Mhm.
a tool is to see it that way. For me, that's been helpful, and it's going to show up differently for everybody again.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah. And dealing with each of these different diagnoses is going to be different for everybody. And we'll, you know, pronounce that several times throughout it. The recovery journey is different for everybody. What works for one person. I will say I actually did not use medication to deal with my eating disorder. And that was a decision I made with the treatment
yeah,
team. So I didn't just say, no, I'm not taking it. I gave my reasons why. They were willing to let me give it a shot, and I kinda we had this negotiation. I said, "I wanna try it without medication." They let me do that. Again, I was in that supportive environment, but I was also willing to acknowledge, well, if it doesn't work out that way, then medication. Um, so yeah, I think the answers really are within, and I would hear
yeah.
that a lot from my treatment team. They're like, "Look in, you know yourself better than anybody else.
Mhm.
The answers are there." So, but yeah, maybe going for a walk for somebody, that's a great coping. For other people, it's listening to music,
Mm.
journaling. So make sure it's what works for you. I think it's a great idea to always share ideas of what has worked, but
Yeah.
you really do have to find what works for you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and as speaking of that, like, what I mean, self-compassion work has been huge for me,
Hmm.
just, at leaning into that and, talk therapy. Like,
Hmm.
as a kid, it was hard for me to talk it out, and now it's like my second language, just talking all the time, but it has been really helpful
Hmm.
and healing, and so that's been, I've leaned into those. What about you? What's been kind of what
Yeah.
was helpful for you early on,
Mhm.
to cope with your other mood disorders as well,
Yeah,
and now.
absolutely. I was surprised by this one, but art therapy. I'm not an artist,
Oh,
but I
yeah.
loved what came out and just what discussing it,
Mhm.
like the therapeutic part afterwards. So you just draw whatever comes to mind or put together whatever just pops into your head.
Yeah.
And it may seem like very benign or just
Mhm.
nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
But then as you talk through it, it's like, oh, this is why it showed up.
Mm.
So yeah, just kind of that outlet of art. Again, not an artist in any type of medium. So,
Yeah.
but I was surprised. And I'm a huge advocate of art therapy. I just wish
Yes.
that was more common.
Uh-huh.
I would encourage, if you're feeling like art therapy is what I want to do with my life, I encourage you to do it. It's
Yeah.
definitely a need. So I found art therapy, journaling, even though I was doing that before I went into treatment, I just found it was just a continued outlet for me. Um, Trying to think of what else. Grounding and mindfulness was actually something that was difficult for me to learn.
Yeah.
Meditation
Oh,
was another one. I
we're
was like,
always on the move. We
yeah,
just wanna, like,
I know.
yes,
I was
escape
like,
the feeling.
I just can't let my mind go quiet because then it goes to the bad stuff. So
Yes.
that one was very, very challenging for me. Even to this day, I can only meditate for so long because
Mhm.
I have a busy mind. But yes, just kind of the outlets of journaling and art. Yeah, I found those to be the most helpful for me. And now grounding or just, having something in my hand
Yeah.
or, just having that mindfulness has been really, really helpful. And again, doing different people can do mindfulness and grounding in different ways, but
Mhm.
being in the present um and bringing myself back there has been very helpful for me.
That's
Yeah.
so awesome. I love that. I love
Yeah.
the art therapy aspect of it too, because what a great lesson in, like, not being perfect, just,
Right.
and sometimes we don't have the words to describe
Hmm.
how we're feeling or what we're going through, and when you start, like, playing with clay or, moving a paintbrush across the paper, those feelings can come out, and
Yes.
especially if you're working with someone that can, help you interpret that, that is, like, just so powerful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I even to this day, I still try to do little art projects here and there, in my home and things like that. Again, still not a Picasso or anything like that, but yeah, I like what comes out from the subconscious or, that part of your mind where it's like, well, this just seems very ordinary, or I'm drawing a flower or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But then kinda dissecting it and just looking at it differently, like, "Okay,
Yeah.
this is why it's coming out." So,
Yeah.
that interpretive piece or that, deep dive, so
And I love that we are both sharing what works for us individually, and then
mhm,
tying that back into,
mhm,
what other issues that I'm going through is, it looks different than what Kelly goes through, and even, you know, across eating disorders, we all are we're unique people,
yes.
we share this diagnoses, but we all have our own struggles. We may, have trauma. We have, and even our trauma looks different than
Mhm,
each other's, and that's just kind of goes back to our recoveries, look different, and
yes.
I think this really brings that to light, and why that's so important to have individualized approaches to your recovery, because you are all dealing with different things on different levels at different times, but it also all requires care and compassion.
Self-compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that one was one that took me a while
Oh yeah.
to grasp as well. It's like, "Well, I did this, it was bad, I need to punish myself for it," but no, forgiveness, that self-forgiveness piece too is
Yes.
a part of dealing with all of them,
Mhm.
all of my diagnoses. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
it's been helpful for me to, like, I was just talking with, um my husband last week, just that I'm like, "Oh, I like, starting to feel just uncomfortable in myself or whatever." And he's like, "Well, what else is going on?" And
Mm,
he knows that I, like, when I'm feeling anxious, these thoughts and feelings get heightened. And then I know that about myself as well. And
yep.
or if I'm not managing other pieces of my mental health or my health in general,
Mhm.
because the co-occurring disorders and that co-occurring term can also encompass your physical or medical issues as well.
Yeah.
So different stages of our life. Like I know, women going through menopause or
Mhm.
um, especially like after having a child for me, that kind of was a really important
Yeah.
point in my life. Okay, now I need to make sure I've got my eating disorder supports in place, and even my I struggled with postpartum depression with a few of my pregnancies, and just kind of knowing that about myself. And so yeah, so that's really important, just knowing that some other medical
Mhm.
issues can bring up the eating disorder,
Yeah,
and it's important to manage those as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, I did like that you were talking about the individualized piece, knowing what else is behind certain
Yes.
things,
Yeah.
because we do have a holiday coming
Oh,
up,
yes, we
which
do.
can
Hmm.
be stressful times,
Yeah.
and this is why it's also important to have your individualized
Hmm.
coping plan in
Hmm.
place, knowing, who that person is that you can check in with,
Yes.
and, of course, too, what do boundaries look like? Because that's something that looks
Oh
different
my
for everybody
gosh.
as well.
Yes.
So having your boundaries, setting those in place before the holidays,
Yeah.
if the holidays happen to be stressful for you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's time to collect those tools, put them in your toolbox, put on your tool belt, and
Ye-
just get ready for the holidays.
yes.
And we'll talk about it next week too, but it's
Yes.
also it is it's just cheesy, but it is a joyous time.
Yeah.
And it's a hard time.
Hmm.
And they can coexist, and just leaning into those small moments,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, it's not just the eating piece because we did just talk about co-occurring
Yes.
disorders. So what does it look like for those symptoms when they prop
Mhm.
up for any mental health condition that you're dealing with? So
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Great. Yeah. So, well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll be on next week to go over just getting ready for the holidays and navigating eating disorder recovery during the holidays. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Thanks so much for joining us this week. With honesty and compassion, Recovery Rising reminds you that eating disorder recovery isn't just possible, it's worth celebrating.